Congratulations, true crime addicts. We've survived another week. It is Friday, July 26th, 2024. This week, police shoot a woman for daring to boil water on her stove. Karen Reed gets a new trial date. And a haunted house owner turns evil. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Yes, super excited. We are all pumped to have James Renner.
James Renner on.
That James Renner has zeroed in on.
James Renner once again drops a bombshell.
Investigative journalist, reporter, James Renner, who's been on the podcast, longtime friend of mine.
And we're back with more true crime this week with me, your host, James Renner. There's the James Renner bell. Welcome to the show. Hey, speaking of the show, I'm going to start adding some interviews that'll come out in between episodes. True Crime This Week will continue coming out every Friday morning, wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. But I'm going to add interviews with notable true crime people. I'm beginning next week with interviewing the author of the new book on the Lauren Spearer case, College Girl Missing. And I mentioned that book last week, but I wanted to follow up with him and get kind of scoops, because I knew he was onto something. And you're going to want to hear what he's found in the Lauren Spearer case. That's one of the more popular true crime mysteries. So sometime early next week, check that out. Just subscribe. It'll, show up in your feed. As always, I want to thank my buddy Walter for manning the camera. Walter's just back from a secret meeting with Kamala Harris. Now, I'm not saying he's her top VP pick, but I'm also not saying he's not. Let's get to the top stories. That's what you came here for. There's been some crazy news in the world of true crime this week. Let's get right to it. No doubt about it, the top story this week is Sonya Massey. And if you haven't heard about it, you gotta get up to speed here real quick. Police in Springfield, Illinois, released video this week of a sheriff's deputy's fatal shooting of 36-year-old Sonya Massey, a black woman who called 911 for assistance, and it's not good. At around 1 a.m. on July 6th, Massey called 911 because she thought there was a prowler outside her house, according to the Associated Press. 30-year-old Deputy Sean Grayson responded with another police officer. When they arrived, they first searched around Massey's home, and they discovered a black SUV with all of its windows busted out, so apparently there was some sort of a prowler. At the time, Massey came to the front door to greet the police. On the body cam video that was just released, she can be heard saying, "Don't hurt me." She seemed confused and said, "I don't know what to do." She's the mother of 2 teenagers, and she's suffered from mental illness in the past that might have contributed to some of her odd reactions to police that night. Then Massey goes back inside of her house, and the policemen follow her inside. Once inside, Deputy Grayson asked for her name to include in his report. Massey started to search her purse for ID. Then Grayson noticed a pot over an open flame on the stove in the kitchen. The kitchen and living room it's kind of an open floor plan. There's a little counter in between. And he said, what's all that about? And it appeared to be boiling water. Massey went to the stove then and moved the pan toward the sink as if she was going to empty it. At that point, Grayson backed into the living room. Massey asked where he was going, and he replied, quote, "Away from your hot, steaming water," end quote. Massey then said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." That's when Grayson pulled his 9mm pistol and said, quote, "You better fucking not, or I swear to God I'll fucking shoot you in the fucking face," end quote. He yelled for her to put the pot down. She apologized and kneeled down with the pot still in her hands. She made no move toward the officer, who was in another room, but Grayson shot her in the fucking face anyway. Later in the video, Grayson can be heard justifying his actions to other deputies, saying, quote, "What else do we do? I'm not taking hot fucking boiling water to the fucking face," end quote. A grand jury disagreed. Grayson has since been indicted on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and official misconduct. First Assistant State's Attorney Mary Beth Rogers said Grayson was in no danger due to the distance between himself and Massey and had several other options other than shooting her in the face. Quote, "At no point did this defendant show anything but callousness toward human life," end quote, she said. Grayson now faces 45 years to life for Massey's murder. 2 lives thrown away in an instant because an armed man was so afraid of a black woman making macaroni. Norfolk County DA Michael Morrissey can't get enough of Karen Reed and plans a sequel to this year's most gripping courtroom drama. Karen Reed will face a new trial over the death of her boyfriend John O'Keefe, according to NBC News. The new trial is scheduled for January 27th, but it will be very difficult. It's a much more difficult case to prosecute this time around. First of all, the jurors in the first trial voted unanimously to acquit Reed on charges of second-degree murder and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. They were never polled by Judge Auntie Bev before she declared a mistrial, which was either an egregious mistake or a calculated oversight. Reed's lawyers are arguing that bringing Karen Reed to trial again on these same charges amounts to double jeopardy. The remaining count, motor vehicular manslaughter, could still be in play. Jurors could not agree on that count because of intent. It had to do with intent, and they were deadlocked on their opinions on that charge, which is what led to that mistrial. But also, the state will have to figure out what to do about their star witness, lead detective Michael Proctor, who was suspended without pay following the first trial due to his misconduct in the case. He had texted his buddies and said he was looking for nude photos on her phone, said he hoped she killed herself. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. 2 other police officers involved in this case, Detective Brian Tolley and Sergeant Yuri Buhenik, are currently under investigation by Internal Affairs for their tomfoolery. Now, here's my hunch. Here's what I think is happening. For what it's worth, take it or leave it. Here's what I think. I think the state knows it's good and truly screwed in this case, but is hoping to set up a new trial, which would be quite expensive for Reed and her attorneys. I think they're doing that because they're hoping to force her into an Alford plea on the manslaughter charge. Now, that would be a win for both sides. Reed would probably face no prison time, and the state could close the case without looking further into the Boston police officers who own the property where O'Keefe's body was found. It's kind of a win-win. I think that's what they're going for. But I think Karen Reed just might gamble, against her being found guilty in court. So anyways, we'll see what happens on August 9th. That's when everybody returns to court for a hearing on a motion to dismiss. The owner of a Tennessee's haunted house. This is Tennessee's most frightening haunted house attraction, and he's also a Biff Tannen lookalike. Russ McKamey was charged this week with the attempted murder and rape of his girlfriend, according to Law and Crime. You may have seen McKamey in the recent Hulu documentary Monster Inside, America's Most Extreme Haunted House, which showed the attraction that McKamey had constructed in Summertown, Tennessee, which he called McKamey's Manor. When I was a kid, I loved to go to haunted houses. We had a couple really good ones in Akron, the Haunted Schoolhouse and Laboratory. But I remember there were always rumors of better haunted houses, more frightening haunted houses where you had to sign releases and the monsters could touch you. I just assumed that was always an urban legend, but that's exactly the sort of haunted house that McKamey was running. An Army veteran who signed a release and went inside McKamey's haunted house told the Tennessean that, quote, "Deep down, I knew they were not going to kill me, but trust was broken with Russ McKamey," end quote. Some of the participants of McKamey's Manor have been locked in a cage that filled with water, leaving them just enough room to breathe. At one time, McKamey even held a woman in a storm shelter for an unknown length of time, but avoided charges because he told police it was consensual. He often filmed much of this as well. Following the Hulu documentary, the Attorney General of Tennessee sent McKamey a letter citing numerous concerns. McKamey then filed a lawsuit against Hulu and a participant in the program seeking $8.4 million in damages. But for now, McKamey has enough, he has other important things to worry about. Prosecutors alleged that McKamey strangled his girlfriend during a domestic altercation on July 17th. And then on July 19th, they learned of a second altercation that allegedly took place the same day he was arrested. They say he raped and strangled his girlfriend to the point that she nearly lost consciousness. He's scheduled to appear in court August 6th. Of course, compared to McKamey Manor, Tennessee prison might be nothing to be afraid of. Those are the top stories this week. I've got lots more to come. A lot of cold case updates this week, some genetic genealogy solves, and some weird news that you're going to want to hear. So I'll be back in 2 and 2.
Please hang up and try again.
And welcome back to True Crime This Week. These next stories are brought to you by Betamax. Betamax, you can always spot a genius by its features. Police in Cloverdale, California this week made an arrest in a 42-year-old cold case homicide, according to San Francisco Gate. In May 1982, 13-year-old Sarah Ann Gear had spent the weekend at a friend's house. When she didn't come home on Sunday, her mother assumed she was staying over one more night, but her friend's parents had actually dropped her off at 9 p.m. However, Sarah didn't go inside. Instead, she walked to a nearby arcade. She was last seen there alive around 10 p.m. The next morning, her body was found shoved under a fence behind an apartment complex. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. In 2021, Cloverdale police reopened the case and sent material for new DNA testing and genetic genealogy. That led them to 62-year-old James Oliver Unick, who was arrested for the murder on Monday. The only other crime that appears on his record is an arrest in 1985, that's just a couple years later, when he drove away from a hit and run, evading police for a while. Unick would have been just 20 years old when the 7th grader was murdered in 1982. Whenever I hear stories about this now, here's what I think. I think if you've committed a crime, and I'm speaking to bad guys here, if you've committed a crime and you know you left DNA evidence, just turn yourself in. It's a matter of when you're arrested now, not if. That's how good DNA technology is and genetic genealogy will be. Just get yourself an attorney, negotiate your surrender. You're likely to get a better deal for yourself than if you wait for police to bust down your door. So, bad guys, turn yourself in. Save us some time. A 53-year-old woman named Erin Gall is in hot water this week after threatening to shoot several black teenagers at a graduation party in New Hartford, New York, according to the New York Times. Gall was there with her husband and 18-year-old son when several teens appeared to crash the party around 11:30. A fight broke out and police were called around 12:30 a.m. Now, Gall can be seen and heard on their body cams, which were released this week. She's heard saying, you're going to get in an Uber, buddy, and you're going to get a cop escort, or you're going to get a cop escort home. Now, she also tells one of the black teens, quote, "That's how I roll," end quote. One of the teens had lost their car keys during the ruckus, and later Gall can be heard speaking to the police about what she'd do when they came back for it. Quote, "If they come back looking for it, I'll call you while they're on the property. If they did, they'll be arrested or they'll be shot on the property, because when they trespass, you can shoot them on the property. I will shoot them on the property," end quote. Now, it's a terrible threat, sure, but why is the New York Times reporting on it? Because Gall is a judge, not just any judge. She sits on the state Supreme Court, or did. On Monday, a disciplinary panel said that Gall should be removed from office for engaging in racially offensive diatribes, threatening to shoot black teenagers, and expressing bias in favor of the police. Okay, let's play. Democrat or Republican? Okay, let's check. Okay, here we go. If you said Republican, you win. In 1998, police pulled a body out of the Cumberland River in Nashville, And they came to call her Leo Jane Doe since she was found wearing a necklace with the Leo zodiac sign on it, according to the Tennessean. But until this week, nobody knew her name. Thanks to genetic genealogist at the DNA Doe Project, police have now identified her as Diane Miner, a 54-year-old woman who went missing in '98. And Miner was actually a bit of a local celebrity. In 1962, Miner won Miss Congeniality in the Miss Nashville beauty pageant. She was also an accomplished singer, signing a recording contract with Wilburn Brothers after graduating high school. Eventually, though, she fell into obscurity, managing a restaurant and a bookstore, until her body was found in the river after someone shot her in the head. Now that she's been identified, police have begun to look into who had motive to kill her and who gave her that zodiac necklace. Nice work, DNA Doe Project. I love seeing these cases solved every week. There's usually multiple. A wonderful time. A woman who served 43 years in a Missouri state prison was freed last Friday after a court found that she and her attorneys had established clear and convincing evidence of actual innocence, according to the Associated Press. Sandra Hem was convicted of the stabbing death of library worker Patricia Jeske in 1980. Back then, Hem was questioned by police while she was inside a psychiatric hospital, and during this questioning, she could only answer in one-word responses due to the drugs that she was on at the time. She would answer them in these one-word statements, and they were giving her very leading questions. There was absolutely no evidence linking her to the scene of the crime. In fact, all circumstantial evidence pointed to a co-worker of the police detectives, Michael Holman, who died in 2015. Holman's pickup truck was seen outside Jeske's apartment at the time of the murder, and he tried to use her credit card later. Oh yeah, and he had her earrings inside his house. The state's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, tried to fight the release, but relented after the judge threatened to hold his office in contempt. Welcome home, Sandra. There's this thing we have now called the internet. Avoid it at all costs. Let's jump over to weird news, shall we? A store clerk in Tennessee named Meet Patel, his name is Meet Patel, was arrested for theft this week after he stole a man's $1 million winning lottery ticket after he tried to claim the prize for himself. Apparently, a guy came into his shop in Murfreesboro and asked for 2 diamond and gold scratch-off tickets worth $20 each. The customer then scratched off just the front barcodes and handed them over to Patel and said, "Hey, run this through your scanner, see if I won anything." Now, Patel told the man he won $40, and he gave him his money and then tossed the tickets in the trash. But later, he was seen on surveillance footage fishing the $1 million winning ticket out of the trash and putting it in his pocket. He's also seen on camera celebrating. Now, the newspaper reports don't say how he was celebrating, but I imagine it involved a giant slushie and some roller meat. When Patel tried to claim the prize, lottery officials became suspicious and asked if they could see those tapes from the store. Now, instead of celebrating, Patel is being held on a $100,000 bond. He'll likely need several more of those scratch-off tickets to make bail. Over to pop culture. This week I'm recommending the Yara Gamarasio case, Beyond Reasonable Doubt, which is a new docuseries on Netflix. Here's the write-up. This docuseries digs into the disappearance of 13-year-old Yara and the disconcerting investigation that shattered the peace of a small Italian town. Now, if you're not familiar with this case, Yara disappeared after a gymnastics practice in Lombardy, Italy in November 2010. Her body was found 3 months later in February 2011. Now, this is a case where DNA led police to a man, and eventually that evidence was used to convict him of murder. But it's possible the DNA evidence is not what it appears to be. So if you're interested in genetic genealogy and DNA profiles and all that, this case might be one where they get it wrong. So check that docuseries out. It's fascinating. A lot of it's in Italian, but they do dub it. If I prefer non-dubbing and just reading subtitles, but you do you. The book of the week this week is an older book. It came out a few years ago, but it's now charting again thanks to the success of Greg Olson, who has written several true crime books that have been popping up in the charts again lately. Greg Olson's a great guy, friend of mine, and kind of a mentor, a brilliant true crime writer. You got to read this. This one's charting again. It's called American Black Widow. Here's the write-up. Colorado, 1976. When Reverend Mike Fuller and his beautiful wife Sharon arrive in the sleepy town of Rocky Ford, local residents think something's off about the new couple. The God-fearing minister is gruff and cold, while charismatic Sharon has her husband wrapped around her finger. It isn't long before Sharon is charming her husband's congregation and finds herself in a tryst with a local married optometrist, Perry Nelson. After the affair ends both their marriages, Sharon and Perry tie the knot, but shortly afterwards, Perry disappears. When his body is shockingly discovered in the bottom of a canyon, his death is ruled an accident, allowing grieving widow Sharon to claim his substantial life insurance. Trying to move on from the tragedy, Sharon soon remarries fireman Glenn Harrelson. But when the charred remains of Glenn's body are discovered with 2 bullet holes in his skull, the police can't help but question if both men dying in such mysterious circumstances is one coincidence too many. Check it out, American Black Widow by Greg Olson. And that's the show for this week. Go out, enjoy the weather, the end of the summer, before the school year starts again. And in the words of the incomparable Murray Saul, the godfather of Cleveland radio, that means we gotta get down, damn it. True Crime This Week is a Fearful Symmetry production. Photo and artwork are licensed through Shutterstock. If you like the cut of my jib, I have another podcast you might enjoy called The Philosophy of Crime, in which I attempt to solve the big questions behind our true crime obsession by looking to philosophy for answers. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Sit, Brownie, sit. Good dog.